the important thing about zero impact man is he does it. He doesn't talk about it. Most environmentalists talk about it. They don't live it. So the things that I talk about come from real experience. So it's the hard graft of sustainability, which most people have no idea about.
There are dire warnings that New South Wales will be hit by increasingly extreme weather.
2015 was the hottest year since climate records began.
Figures show this July was the single hottest month in recorded history.
Australia sweltered through its hottest spring on record.
Climate change is now affecting every country on every continent.
It's the rate that's of great concern.
And what do you put that rate down to?
Oh, it's human activity.
We have everything we need. Some still doubt that we have the will to act, but I say the will to act is itself a renewable resource.
Hello and welcome to episode 28 of Climactic, your story on climate change. I'm sitting in the beautiful park of the Shrine of Remembrance here in Melbourne, under a gigantic hawthorn tree, and what I'm doing is actually taking the advice of my guest this week. Get out in nature, get right with yourself before you get into sustainability. My guest is Brett Hedger, Sustainability Officer at Port Phillip for many, many years. And we really get into the deep end of what it means to live sustainably. And honestly, it was pretty confronting when I did this chat a few months ago. And honestly, I felt a little gun shy about getting back into this and releasing it. I didn't want to release a dispiriting or disheartening episode. But it's funny that in the few months since I recorded this interview, the conversation around me, or the conversation I've noticed happening out in the public, has really shifted. And Brett's ideas that 3 months ago I found to be quite confronting now just sound like common sense, and I'm 100% on board. Brett's actually helping to run the EnviroChamps program from Port Phillip Council that I'm a part of right now and I'm doing every week. And it's been fascinating to see his persona with that group, sort of Brett in public relations mode. This interview with him, I think, really lets him show his inner thoughts, what he really thinks about people who want to live sustainably and talk the talk, but would find the truth of what it takes to live sustainably to be really hard, or not what they're expecting, or confronting. I think confronting is probably the best word for this interview. I don't know why I waited so long to release this. And in the process of listening back again, I realized that I couldn't cut this down to one episode. So just like we've had for the last fortnight, this is going to be another two-parter. So I hope you enjoy the first of this two-part interview with Brett Hedger, aka Zero Impact Man. Brett Hedger, thank you so much for sitting down with me. Someone doing the hard yards here who has a job at City Council, but today we're going to be talking about what you do yourself as an individual and this other persona you take on to tell people really the hard truths and the real reality of the situation. Brett, if I could just get an idea of who you are, how long you've worked here, how long you've been active in sustainability. I know it's probably too big a topic to sum up, but where are you from, Brett?
Yeah, so I'm from Victoria, so country Victoria. I've been active in the environmental sector for about 30 years. I've worked here at the City of Port Phillip for 7 years as a sustainability officer, and before that at the Australian Conservation Foundation for a little while.
Fantastic. And what did you do before you got into sustainability?
In just corporate Australia. So I worked in the IT area.
Yep.
So just computer programming and systems management, those kind of things.
Was it kind of a clean break going from IT into sustainability work?
I was long overdue. I was clearly not in the right job in corporate Australia. I just didn't fit.
Yeah.
It just took me a long time to realise that the fit wasn't right.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
What that feeling was in my body, in my heart, and my head, and so it probably reached a natural end for both parties, I think.
There wasn't kind of a blow-up there at the end, though. It sounds like maybe there was a bit of a dramatic change of direction.
I think it was a blow-up over a decade, actually. So,
wow.
But eventually I got there.
Very good. So how, like, a lot of people, like myself, when I'm talking, especially like younger people who are like in high school or university, they think, how can I actually direct my efforts into something that I care about? Like, how can I work in sustainability? Like, how did that transition from IT to sustainability actually happen for you?
Yes, I'll give you my current advice to young environmentalists, and what I generally say is that they should move out of the environment sector and into perhaps an MBA or management sector. Where you can achieve the most is by being the boss, not as the sustainability guy on the floor. A CEO can do in 5 minutes what will take me 10 years, and the CEO changes have longevity, whereas the environmental activist changes can be wiped off the board.
With a change of government, or
10 years hard graft, it can be wiped off the board in 5 minutes. Yeah, you might think that you can do a lot of change in organisations by being the sustainability guy, but it's a hard road, and there's just barriers all the way along. So my suggestion is to, if you're going to confront this from the economic system, go down the economic system path and become the CEO and make big changes.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, stop screwing around at the bottom.
Yep.
That's pointless.
Well, I think that's going to give a good tenor to the conversation, that you're going to hear some hard truths here and some of the past the BS and the fluff, Yeah,
and how did I get into it? Well, it was sort of in my heart. My background is teaching. I have financial degrees. I used to be an electrician, and what was my other degree? Got one more somewhere.
Wow.
IT, sciencey IT stuff. So all of that really lent itself to a skill that's not readily available in environmental sector. People who can figure out all the kilowatt hours, megawatt hours, megajoules, carbon emissions, tons, and all that kind of stuff, all the financial or numbers kind of stuff.
Yes.
There's not many people, and who also understand the hard, heavy electrical stuff and mechanics and those kind of things. So, and I had the teaching and my interest in people on top of that. I sort of fit into a niche. Most environmentalists that I encounter just fall into a specific category, whereas I just go wide and deep. And other environmentalists like the fluffy stuff, the sort of what they call the behaviour changey stuff. Let's make up some posters and have a little campaign and all that kind of stuff. Most of those things aren't done properly either from a behaviour change perspective.
It doesn't have the science behind it. It's not approached in the rigorous way.
Yeah, so
it's done more to make the doer feel better than the receiver. And
just kill time, really.
We haven't done a lot of tangible things in the last 20 years with all the knowledge we've had of what's going on with climate change, how much emissions we are putting out. Just with the trajectory we're on, we haven't done enough with that knowledge.
No, we've messed it up completely, because there's only really one measure from a global warming perspective, and that's parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere. So when I started here 7 years ago, and this is certainly not about the city of Port Phillip, but the parts per million at Hawaii was 387. It just topped 411.25, which is the highest average carbon emissions parts per million measured as far as we know. Average monthly 411.25 for May 2018.
And in Hawaii, there's not a lot of heavy industry. This is more of an atmospheric average.
That's where the Keeling curve hangs out.
Okay, tell me about the Keeling curve.
Well, Charles Keeling is the guy who first started to systematically measure carbon emissions in the atmosphere. So it's known as the Keeling curve. So that tracks the rate of increase of parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere. So they've been running that since, I think, the late 50s. That's the thing that your listeners need to know about. That is the single measure. If you're not looking at that, that's why you can easily say there's lots of solar panels and wind farms and all that stuff around, but the carbon, we're just at our sixth, I was going to say the carbon just keeps increasing. We just passed through our 6th year of accelerating rates of increase. I hope that makes sense. Not only are we increasing, we're increasing at an increasing rate.
Accelerating.
Yeah. When they talk about decline, they only talk about decline in the rate of increase.
Yeah.
And those newspaper headlines come out and say things are declining. It's a really important point for people to know about. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, check out the Keeling curve. That is the single measure for global warming. There's lots of other measures, species loss, which is very hard to measure, but
deforestation, decarbonisation.
All that stuff is available. And rather than me trying to convince people, what's important is that, 10, 20 minutes on the internet and you can find all this stuff out yourself.
Definitely.
The reason why we're not looking at it is because we're not looking. And that's the critical thing. So anybody else who was presented with all of this information, any other species would do something to combat this. Water's running out. Okay, we'll do something about it. What do?
We keep taking more at an accelerating rate.
We keep taking more. How dumb is that? We put ourselves forward as an intelligent species. We say that we're more intelligent than every other species on the planet, but every piece of evidence I can find points to the contrary.
Let's go down this path a little bit, if we can, Brett. When we sat down, you said we need to kind of come to the realization we're not the most special species on the planet. We need to stop putting ourselves above every other living thing on the planet. Yeah, is that a belief that we're not exceptional or special? Is this something that you had to come to through education, or we get told very much that we're special, we can make tools, we can harness fire, therefore we have the right to do whatever we want? It's ingrained in some religious beliefs as well. How did you get to this mindset?
So yes, I certainly agree with you, Mark, that education is a significant problem. Education, from my perspective, is largely about the indoctrination of people to work in the economic system. And anybody who's gone down the path of deep sustainability knows that the economic system is the problem. So what you end up, certainly where I've ended up, is my fight is against the economic system. And that's why programs that promote saving money are not programs that I endorse or encourage. If you're pushing to people saving money, then you're just using the system that's causing the problem. So it doesn't work. In terms of how does this whole species thing come about? Well, I guess Indigenous Australians and Indigenous tribes, and peoples all over the world, First People, have embraced this, maybe not hundreds of thousands of years, but certainly tens of thousands of years as far as we know. That and the simple way to put it is healthy country, healthy people, and it sounds much better in language. Yeah, there's 4 words: healthy country, healthy people. And what is important to understand is that a healthy country comes first, and healthy people. People, you can say, the people aren't the most important thing. They just exist with all the other species, and we've got to come back down into that line that we need a healthy country. We can't be healthy people without a healthy country, and our country's in dire straits at the moment. So bringing ourselves back into that zone is so important, that we start to respect, not only the land, the air and the water, but we respect every other species and the critical roles that they play and the interrelationships that we have absolutely no idea about. And scientists are starting to realise the limitations of their scientific experiments performed, in laboratories, where you take out all of the
other factors,
to make it sort of repeatable. But those things they're quickly discovering can't be repeated in nature because it's such a complex system. And we pretend we're these great, important beings that understand all this complexity.
Understand the natural world.
Anything we do that's complex is, like all the paperwork that we fill out in the taxation system and all that other it's mind-numbing. Yep. And it diverts us away from living simply, with love. In small communities where we look after our country. Healthy country, healthy people. So I guess I've always been interested in Indigenous issues. I've always been interested in the land and the water, animals and birds. They're just beautiful. I just connecting with myself, and I think that's an important point. That I think for your listeners, what I recommend to people is get yourself right first. You're not going to push all your views on everyone else before you get yourself right. Get in touch with your heart and be true to yourself. Nature's just such an important thing, but there's far too many of us now. There are just too many people. As much as I'd like to say healthy country, healthy people, and all the people can get out there in nature, we can't have all those people out there in nature. They'll screw it up. I go bushwalking all the time, mountain climbing, bushwalking, on the lakes and the water and the tracks and in the bush and everywhere. Every single place where people have been, they've stuffed it up. We've got to keep people out of the wild places. But the thing that's added over the top of that is global warming. So we can't just protect wild places anymore. And there's very few wild places left on Earth. But we can't even protect them because of global warming. It destroys the wild places by itself because it's one of those things that's global and all pervasive. Even if we just stay in our concrete boxes in the city, which is where most of us belong, we're still stuffing it up for everything else, every other species. And that's the thing, that realisation, that thing that I just said, doesn't cause a pain in your heart. Maybe you don't have a heart, or it's turned to stone. That we can sit in cities and destroy other species and not give a shit. That's just completely beyond me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why we don't go looking. That's why, myself, I didn't know the name of is Keeler or Keeley?
Keeling.
The Keeling curve, because I know it as, Bill McKibben's hockey stick graph from 350.
Didn't they stuff it up too? 350.org. What is?
We're well past.
What is that? No, but the problem is, when Bill McKibben said do the math, well, he got the math wrong. He got it wrong because this is what a lot of environmentalists do. They give people a budget. So what 350.org said is there's a budget. We can measure this thing in gigatons. Yeah. And sure, you can. What's a gigaton of carbon or carbon emission equivalents? But they gave people a budget. They said keep going. You're fine. You've got a budget. What 350.org should have said was it's all gone. The mark is 280 pre-industrial carbon. So that's the mark. Everything else, that's where we have to stop. What 350.org should have said is, stop, it's over. It's game over already. Now it's 411.25. There is no budget, and that ties back into what we were talking about before, Mark, is that when environmentalists talk about money and saving and all that kind of stuff, this is the same economic thing that says you can continue to live your lifestyle the way you want, just change a few light bulbs. That's all nonsense. It's complete nonsense, and it will never get us closer to the solution because we haven't asked people to really stop and change. It's critical.
So going back to the psychology aspect of, you can do all these things as a well-meaning, very well-intentioned person talking about the environment and sustainability and climate change, and if your message is we need to have stopped before we're already, they have to say, here's some steps before we get to this bad point. You have to give a bit of room out from where we are to account for action to be taken. Here we are, we're still in an office, right? Like we even someone like yourself who's very dedicated to this, we can't do a complete U-turn with no space to move and go back to the land straight away. And as you say, we can't even do that because there's too many people. So
350 was passed in 87. How long do you want for your U-turn? Do you know how long ago 87 was?
A couple decades after I was born would have been nice, but 87 was 3 years before me,
1987. That's when we hit 350. So how long does this species want for a U-turn? Do you want another couple of months? Tell me, Mark, when were you prepared to... And then we might get into what's actually required of that U-turn. But how much longer do you want?
I'm ready. There's a lot about city and society I'm ready to be gone with for the sake of...
But isn't that what we just talked about?
Yeah, it is.
Giving people a bit of time?
Yep, and we've just
given them 3 decades.
That's right.
So, what, you want another 10 minutes to do? See how it doesn't make sense?
Yeah, you're right.
It doesn't make sense.
Talk out that mindset.
And then you go on like, say, 350, and they didn't get the maths substantially wrong. It's the budget part that I'm arguing about. Yeah. And also the projection into the future. This 2050 thing, like Paris, the Paris Accord or Kyoto or any of that nonsense. They never got it right because they always projected into the future. So 2050... we're going to fix it in 2050, and then we're just going to...
The goal by then is to have stopped emitting more every year, but maintain current levels of emissions.
No, we're going to go full on into 2050. We're going to burn every last drop of oil and burn every bit of coal and gas that we can till 2050. That's what's going to happen because we've been told we've got a budget and that everybody is geared up towards that. So nothing is going to change. There's going to be no U-turn, regardless of what I might suggest to you and your listeners.
So you've laid out kind of the grim, dark future there.
Collectively, we've laid it out because collectively we've said no. Collectively, we want to continue our lifestyles as they are. And if you say yes to wanting to protect your lifestyle, and environmentalists to blame as well, because their messages have consistently been, you can continue doing this, just change your light bulbs, have a shorter shower. And that's worked, has it? But none of that's worked.
Not really, no.
No, because no one's... We're like little kids that have never been told no. We're all just spoiled. If I put this problem mark to any early primary school kid, later primary school kids, it's too late, because they get systematized to right and wrong. Early kids and kindergarten kids, if I present this problem to them, they can answer it straight away. They won't put up any of the barriers that, you're not putting up many. We haven't talked deeply.
Explaining where my potential barriers would be coming from if I was making them, but I agree.
we haven't put much of that up yet, but a kindergarten child can solve this problem.
Mm-hmm. What we're doing now is...
But you can't.
We stop. Yeah, but it's shackled by a little bit of a knowledge of history to say that every single attempt to bring down the economic model of capitalism for the last 100 years has failed.
Yeah, but it's within your grasp right now. And it's within the grasp of all of the listeners. It's really simple.
Stop consuming.
No, not necessarily stop consuming. There's other ways around it.
Stop emitting.
Yeah, I guess it's a little more involved than that. I mean, that's where that whole zero impact man.
Yeah.
So I've called myself Zero Impact Man for the last two sustainable living festivals. I've just given a presentation about the zero impact lifestyle, and where that sort of comes from is that guy in America who called himself No Impact Man. And people love to find holes. They feel confronted by this persona of this zero impact man. So they love
poppy syndrome on a sustainability basis.
Maybe they want, just in my experience, what people want to see is that, yeah, there's this perfect guy out there like Bear Grylls, Bear Man versus Wild or whatever. This guy who can do everything. They don't want to be that person.
No.
In the same way they don't want to be Zero Impact Man.
Mm-hmm.
They want to know that there's perfection possible.
Yeah.
But then as soon as they confront that perfection, they want to find a hole.
Yep.
It's like Bear Grylls. Oh, he's got a helicopter team there and his TV crew and all that kind of stuff, or whatever. It's the same with me. Are you wearing leather shoes? How can the Zero Impact Man wear leather shoes? And then as soon as I become fallible, the perfection is gone and they turn the other way anyway. They'll turn the other way from the perfection and they'll turn the other way as soon as he becomes fallible. So you can't win. Mm-hmm. I don't know of anyone who's been able to complete my 52-week challenge apart from me. And the 52-week challenge is only the first part of the challenge. And that would turn things around. If everyone in Australia, that would change the economic system very, very quickly. Within 6 to 12 months, we'd be living in a different country.
All right, now's a good time for you to tell me about this.
Yeah, the critical thing to know about the 52-week challenge, Mark, and it's year one. There's other years. Mm-hmm. So, but the critical thing that I'm going to say to people is that it's forever. It's not like Meat-Free Monday or Plastic-Free July or any of those. Those campaigns are good to get started, but they don't get to the heart of the matter.
Yeah, they're not a solution.
Yeah,
they are.
Yeah, things like that I'd call plastic-free forever, meat-free forever.
Yeah.
So the 52-week challenge is around things that once you start and you do them forever. Forever means your lifetime, and you work as hard as you can for the rest of your life to help others to do that as well. So any of these little suggestions, and I've got a list you can have a look at in a minute, but any of the things on the list are forever changes, and that's what confronts people. I mean, I have to stop this forever, Brett? Well, yeah, you do. Because you start out the conversation and you say, so Mark, we agree that there's a climate problem?
Yes.
We agree that it's an emergency?
Yes.
Yeah. And so you'd like to commit to some changes in your life?
Yes.
Yeah. And he's saying forever in the background to all you listeners out there. So, yeah, they're forever changes, and that's the first bit to get over that hump, that things have to change and they have to change forever.
I kind of like always stepping back quite a bit from problems like this and sort of taking an anthropological look or the bird's eye view and something. Any of these things, I'm assuming, before I see the list, the things I'd be giving up are only things that 1, 2, 3, up to maybe 7 or 8 generations of mankind has been able to have. And that's even that it's been in the industrialized West. There's a lot of these things on the list I'd be giving up are things that a lot of people in the world have never had and don't have today. So like that kind of really softens the blow for me, because I think, well, if I don't have something my parents had, that's fine. They were that generation that was blessed by capacity and ignorance. And no one else sort of deserves that stuff anyway.
Yeah.
They didn't deserve them anyway. It was a lottery anyway.
Yeah, and I don't know that that's the angle I'd take on it, Mark, that it's a giving up thing. So, and it's certainly, you could live in a similar way that you do now, I don't know how you live, but you could certainly live in a similar way. If you came to my house, you might be in for a few surprises, but it'd be very similar to the way you live in your house. But the impact is markedly different. So that's the thing. And the whole thing about, this is a common argument used against environmentalism and climate change, or doing something about climate change. It's going to take us back to the Stone Age. That's not true. That's just nonsense as well. So, but I think each of us has to start on that journey and make some of these forever changes. And there's also changes that you can make just in the background that are really, really simple and have virtually no impact. So switch your superannuation. This is one of the most powerful things you can do. You ask a room full of environmentalists and people who say it's a climate emergency, ask them where their superannuation is. I'm not asking you to do anything apart from not invest in fossil fuels. Number one, do it. So everybody out there listening, there's a website, marketforces.org or .com.
There'll be a link.
Yeah, get on that and divest your superannuation. Imagine if everyone in Australia did that. We wouldn't be even talking about Adani. That just wouldn't be available. That just wouldn't even come up. All the coal-fired power stations would be closed. Do you see? A lot of us talk about that stuff, but we don't actually do it.
That's true.
We don't do it. And that's probably one of the most powerful things as an individual you can do to take charge of your money. Let them know before you do it. Let them know while you're doing it. I'm talking about the organisations that say you've got your superannuation invested with, big corporate A. Tell them that you're concerned before you take action. Wait for their response. Take the action after they give you the corporate response that is meaningless, hollow, and
that's right.
Got 7 paragraphs too many.
We take our responsibility to manage your money very seriously, but we will continue to do it in a terrible way.
Exactly. And then take action, and then tell them about it. Always tell them about it, and don't fall for the trap of big corporate superannuation fund has a little sustainability fund. It's like the 0.5%, 99.5% invested in all the old traditional stuff, and 0.5% here for you greenies, keep you guys happy and stop you annoying us. So we got a sustainability fund. We invest in all that, that greeny stuff. Yeah, it's all greenwash. So get out completely and get into. There's only 2 funds in Australia that are free from fossil fuels.
That's Ethical Super, Future Super?
Yeah. Yeah, Australian Ethical and Future Super.
Yeah.
Future Super is completely clear and Australian Ethical is just a super company with a great history, and that they only have one minor blemish. It wouldn't be that big of a concern. I'm invested in both of those, just to declare my hand.
Yeah, I'm fully with Ethical. So I'd love to know more about that blemish, but I'll talk to you.
Yeah, well, you can see that on the Market Forces website. You don't have to get my information.
Yeah.
Market Forces is the central place for Australians to go.
That's great.
To learn about their superannuation, health insurance, banks. There's one other thing on there. But it's our contact through the transactions that we make that are largely invisible to us. Superannuation, for example, insurance, health insurance, and banking. We largely leave those in the background of our lives and pretend that they're so difficult to change. Those 4 things, or that one thing, if you call it divestment, is one of the most powerful things that an individual can do, because if you've been working for 10 or 20 years, you've got a little stash of cash in super.
It's invisible to you most of the time.
Your bank transactions, if you've got a mortgage or any of those kind of things, they're big things, and they do have big impacts.
Definitely.
If you start saying, I'm going to move it, I've moved it, I told you I'd move it, why didn't you do something?
I'm not sleeping so much better at night.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a simple change. That's one of, well, perhaps two of the things on the first year's list.
All right, cool. Well, that's 2 down for me.
Yeah.
Play. All right, so that's 2 off the list. Now, how about the rest? Well, I'm not sure if you can hear it in the background, but buying a car with a very bad muffler and very loud engine noise sadly isn't on that list. But a lot of really good stuff is. Sorry to have to end it on a cliffhanger for you, but that will be all in next week's episode. I hope you got a lot out of this interview with Brett. I hope you can see why I initially found it to be kind of a lot to process all at once, and why I needed a couple months distance from it to dive back into the edit and to think about releasing it on the show. This really felt like, to me, a dive into the true subconscious or the unstated opinions of most people who are super passionate, but also really practical about sustainability, and who are tackling the problem of global warming and climate change with their eyes really fully open. And I appreciated so much Brett's candor and honesty when he sat down with me. And I hope you got a lot out of it too. So hopefully you like this and you're looking forward to next week's episode. But if you did enjoy the chat with Brett, please check out the links to more of his work in the show notes below. And now for some listener feedback. This is an email from Kate about the Tongaroa Blue episode with Haiti Taylor. Great podcast. Very informative. Highlighting the interconnectedness of climate change and plastic marine debris as both originating from the same wasteful, careless, and excessive consumer behavior is brilliant. I really liked your reference to unintended consequences, Haiti. It's very true that we have no concept of how far-reaching the negative effects of plastic debris will be, and we should all act to curb plastic use to absolute essentials until environmentally sound alternatives are developed. The hormone-disrupting properties of some chemicals is very scary. Thank you for that, Kate. It's so cool to hear what people are enjoying about the show. And if you have any feedback yourself, just let us know at hello@climactic.fm or send us a message on social media. And with the helicopter overhead pulling me back into reality and out of my reverie among the trees at the Shrine of Remembrance, I'll do one quick last bit of housekeeping. Climactic is now 6 months old. I can't believe it's already been that long since we launched the show back in April. I'm incredibly excited and humbled that people like Maxine are joining the network. They're bringing us stories from across the country. It just makes me feel so happy. So now is also a really good time to ask you all a favor. Back when it was just me and Rich and Caleb doing the show, I was so happy with the numbers we were getting. It was a really fun hobby, and the fact you guys were listening was so validating. And that's still absolutely the case. But now we've got other people giving us their time and their effort in bringing us stories. I'd really love to grow the audience for their work, because I really strongly believe that the stories we're telling are ones that a lot of people want to hear. We don't do any marketing or advertising for the show, so really the only way we can grow is if you lovely folks who are hopefully enjoying the show tell a friend who would enjoy it as well. On behalf of the Climactic team, thank you for listening. Have a great week. And here's the credits. Co-host, Rich Bowden. Producer, Caleb Fidecaro. Designer, Abigail Hawkins. Composer of our excellent theme music, Greg Grassi. Senior advisor, Gretchen Miller. And the first of our new Climactic correspondents, Maxine Baisley. And we'll be back with part 2 with Brett next week.
The Climactic Collective.